going to open the meeting.
Yeah.
Great. Good afternoon. I'm Jeremy Goldstein and would like to welcome you to the July 20th Design Review Committee. This is a 9-person committee whose primary function is to perform design review for projects located in one of the city's 3 designated design review areas: downtown, the riverfront, and the new hotel overlay zone districts. This is a mandatory review voluntary compliance process with one exception for hotels seeking to skip council review. Hotels taking advantage of this incentive must receive a positive recommendation from the committee. All committee members and staff are now participating in person. We are streaming live on our virtual engagement hub, which is accessible through the virtual engagement hub link on the front page of the city website and also linked on the committee page. You can also watch the meeting on the city's YouTube channel, either live or recorded. Roll call. I will now take roll call. Christina Boer.
Here.
Catherine Ankaya.
Here.
Stephen Lee Johnson.
Here.
Thomas McLaughlin.
Here.
Michael McDonough.
Here.
Ryan Moffitt.
Here.
Robin Raines.
Here.
And Ricardo Sejo.
Here.
Great. We have a quorum. So the first item on our agenda would be approval of the minutes from the June 15th meeting.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. The minutes are approved. Okay, we have one item on our agenda today, which would be old business. It's a formal design review of 68 Carter Street, which is the Carter Street Mixed-Use Tribute Hotel. It's a level 2. It's been before us twice before. Will, I'll let you start us off.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, committee members. Will Palmquist with Planning and Urban Design Department. I will give a very brief recap of this project known as, located at 68 Carter Street, known as the Carter Street Mixed Use and Tribute Hotel. I know it's been before us a couple of times. I won't belabor the details of the project, try to highlight some of the changes and evolution of the project's design and the new information that's before us today. I'll mostly refer to these rendering graphics for now, but we have available site plans and elevations too that you all have access to. So let me know if you want to see any other exhibits as we move along. So this project is located at 68 Carter Street on about 1¼ acres. It's located between some existing social services, the A Hope Day Center to the south and the Salvation Army Center for Hope to the north. It's in the CBD zoning district outside of the traditional downtown core within the tallest height zone. The subject property is located within the hotel overlay for small and large hotels, and the site does not have frontages on any key pedestrian streets. As being proposed is an 8-story tall mixed-use building with 115 hotel guest rooms, 24 residential units, and commercial space. 165 structured parking spaces are proposed within 2 levels of underground parking, and the gross square footage for the overall building is 159,000 square feet. So the project is seeking a review as a level 2 hotel project, where the review and approval by the design review committee would be mandatory review, mandatory compliance, and as long as they essentially get approval from this board, this committee, meet all the CBD zoning requirements, and contribute and meet the requirements of the public benefits table for hotel projects, approval by city council would not be required. As far as access to the site, there is vehicular access from both Carter Street, which is kind of the main hotel area access point, where essentially it would lead to kind of a valet auto court where the valet service would take place, and then a ramp down to underground parking. On Ann Street, the vehicular access to the garage would be mostly for the residential parking. For those uses, you can see here this 2-story kind of commercial space that fronts on Ann Street, the design of which has been amended over time. New 10-foot wide sidewalks are proposed with street trees. In addition, number is in addition to the minimum required number, and that's both on Carter and Ann Streets. So I'll touch on maybe some of the new information that we've received for this review. Also talk a little bit about some of the other evolution of the project. The project has been before us a few times. It was informally reviewed back in October, and there was discussion about the building's design and architecture, the opportunity for green building technology, and a more designed public realm. It was reviewed by the Downtown Commission in April. Similar discussions took place, a lot of it centering around the public safety of the area and the inclusion of a SEPTED approach to kind of organically promoting a safe environment. That's crime prevention through environmental design standards. It was formally reviewed at the April 20th and May 18th meeting, where it was continued both times. There's a lot of discussion about the opportunity for a green roof or other green building technologies, enhancement of the streetscape, the former design of the north and south building elevations that were at the time, I guess, relatively sparsely designed. I think those designs have evolved since that April meeting. We reviewed them back in May. I think the committee was relatively enthused with those changes. There was some discussion about the main facade on Carter Street's design, and that kind of center vertical element that has kind of changed over time, I think to a place where the DRC is in support of that element as well. There was some discussion about the use of either differentiating materials or designs of the Ann Street facade to have it read as more of a public commercial space as opposed to a hotel use. So the architect has worked to kind of flesh out and evolve that design of that two-story Carter Street portion of the building. Otherwise, the project is compliant with the CBD zoning district in the UDO. It is supported by a number of the design review guidelines in the Downtown Design Review Guideline document. One additional element that was shared since that May meeting is regarding a more robust streetscape plan. So I'll talk about that for a second here. I'll start with Carter Street. So on Carter Street, it's a little hard to read the text, but what's being proposed is kind of these built-in planters around the recessed hotel entry. This is the pedestrian entry here beneath the building, and then the garage entrance is to the right, I believe. Pavers at the hotel entry to kind of differentiate that streetscape as being an entrance into that building. And then along the building as it kind of steps down with the grade of Carter Street, these built-in planting areas, or perhaps a green wall that would grow and be kind of maintained below this floor plate, where the main windows of the building begin. On Ann Street, kind of similar approaches where differentiated pavers are proposed at that main retail entrance, and what they're kind of calling a terraced flex zone along the building edge. And that's kind of denoted here in this different paving material. The idea being that could be used for different elements such as planters, seating, or even some kind of displays by those tenants there. So those are kind of the major changes since the May 18th review of the project. At this point, there are no proposals for any other kinds of green roof or green stormwater infrastructure, which I know the committee was asking about the last couple of reviews. Otherwise, I think the architecture and design of the building is relatively unchanged from prior reviews, so I won't go into a lot of detail on that. Yeah, that pretty much sums it up. I'd glad to answer any questions. I know we have the applicant team with us today that could provide more information or answer any other questions you may have as well.
Any questions for Will? Okay, yeah, if the applicant wants to come up and provide any additional information since the last continuance.
Before we have the site plans, floor plans,
Okay.
and streetscape plans.
All right.
Hey, Matt Gower, ODA Architecture. Good to see you all again. Glad to be in front of you again with this project. Thanks, Will, for the great recap on the history of the project. I'd actually brought kind of a slideshow to sort of compare where we started and where we've ended up now. I don't know that that's necessarily necessary, but happy to walk through that if you guys would kind of like me to. But in the last meeting, I mean, I think the main thing that we have responded to is in a request to study the streetscape more and provide the same level of design to the streetscape as we have to the building. And so we've tried to do that with some of the great suggestions the committee had. So on Carter Street, the planter areas and potential for either just planted areas or vining, kind of plants up the facade of the building to really energize that streetscape along Carter, and then also on the Ann Street side, we've taken some of those materials and brought them to the horizontal plane at the street level or the sidewalk level, and with that being a fairly steep slope along Ann Street, I thought that sort of terraced zone would be a beneficial amenity. It kind of creates some small gathering spaces. It is large enough for some tables and chairs if there's, say, a coffee shop or something in that retail space, or if it's an artist studio, they can use those terraced areas for display. And so that's kind of why we labeled it as a flex zone, not knowing what that retail space would necessarily be, but trying to find a way to, again, bring that building architecture out into the street and into the sidewalk a little bit, and again, sort of enliven that experience. I think one of the things that Will didn't mention just in some of the changes that we've made is increase the number of street trees both on Ann and Carter Street. We also made a pretty strong effort to increase pervious area on the site wherever we could, and increase the number of trees on site in addition to the street trees to again really help to mitigate certainly that heat island effect that is a concern in this part of town. Certainly knowing that this part of downtown is, and this site in particular, is basically a big asphalt unshaded plain, and so doing everything we can to mitigate those concerns. We did look at green roof as an option. We studied it, but I think at the end of the day, from a financial perspective on the project, and our ownership can certainly speak to that more if needed, but the amount of retainage from that area of green roof was not a significant amount. We would still require the underground storm retention and treatment regardless, and so it was ownership's decision to elect to not include that in the project. But again, we have provided green areas at the street, at the drop-off area. We've got planter areas that we've added at the roof terraces, and then again, looking back into the design guidelines, where it does encourage green roofs, it also encourages roof terraces, which I believe neither are requirements but are strongly encouraged. And we have provided roof terraces both at the pool and meeting amenity level, as well as at the 8th floor restaurant bar amenity level. So, we hope that, and certainly feel that our collaboration with you as a committee has brought a lot of great elements to the project, and I think, brings a lot of good things that you all as local residents and representing the town will appreciate, and happy to answer any questions you have with the project overall or with the new additions that we've presented today. So.
Thank you. Do we have any specific questions for the applicant?
I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
For the roof, if you guys are not providing a green roof, I would I'm going to recommend that you look at something that is at least, low albedo, high emittance, so that the benefits of the green roof are multiple, but there are other kinds of roofs that provide some of those benefits. So in the case of the heat island effect, we would like to at least have an impact on that, and that is just a matter of obviously carefully looking at the specs, and it's a no-cost spec, right? It just requires thinking about it and making the choice. And I have a couple of questions about the streetscape stuff. On the Carter Street side, the note for the green wall says alternate. Is that alternate to the planter, or?
Yeah, so the intent was that we would either provide a planter with, kind of ground level planting, or a planter that has vining. In the plant it could be taller, so something that
Why not
has a
both?
columnar effect. I think we just hadn't decided on maybe what that landscaping would look like, but we wanted to commit to landscaping there that would be vertical in nature. So whether it's a shrub with a kind of a higher growth pattern or columnar effect, or whether it's a vining sort of trellising plant. I mean, I think we just wanted to study and make sure we're planting the right vegetation there that will thrive and in that location.
Yeah, the ones closest to that entry aren't really going to work as a green wall. They're just too short. So it's really just a planter.
Right. So it's kind of maybe a bit of both. But.
And then on the Ann Street side, is there any concern about those steps, those open steps like that, creating a trip hazard for somebody stepping off of there? Like if we have cafe tables or something like that, and somebody gets up and not thinking about it and just falls, I mean, I know that it's not high enough to require a guardrail, but I would also recommend that you keep in mind that, something that isn't required by code is sometimes a good idea. Like,
Sure.
Center handrails and monumental stairs, things like that. Just to keep in mind that if you have somebody sitting there at having a coffee or lunch or a sandwich or something, and then suddenly they stand up because they forgot where they are,
Right.
That it is high enough that somebody could trip. So just to keep that in mind and address that. That's all I have.
On that same last tag, how many of those openings are operable? Is each bay going to those terraces operable?
No, so the retail space is down at that entry level, and it's not a terrace slab within the retail space, although the height is such that, I suppose you could have some access out there, but just with the significant slope of the street, it was.
Why not just run the sidewalk to the building?
Well, that's what we had originally, and so we were trying to make an effort to create a zone there that was engaging to the streetscape and brought some of that architecture out. I mean, if it's, I think the slope is probably a bit too much to provide a space for tables and chairs. It would not be comfortable to sit at a cafe table with that sort of incline. But so the idea was, is there a way to kind of create a usable space there that is flexible for multiple uses? I mean, certainly if the committee feels the terracing is more of a hindrance on the experience.
It does nothing. You stated kind of the goal. I don't think it actually helps you get towards creating a functional zone there. It seems to me as nobody would know how to use that space. The public isn't invited from the sidewalk into it necessarily, and it's disconnected from the retail space, so it's this kind of weird hazardous zone between the building and the sidewalk. I'd go back, my personal opinion, go back to where you were.
I like the detail of you're bringing that brick that surrounds the window down and out, but I think you could do that just in the paving and keep it, because I'm not positive, but I'm pretty sure you got a two risers right there. I'm pretty sure the city's gonna require handrail on each side, which is gonna change the entire look of this and the feel of it. It's gonna be a really separated zone. So I would just, and, you know, you can still, in Asheville, we're used to sitting with tables like this. So, I think it could, I think it would read better. I think the change of materials is fun, and I like the little brick coming out, but I wouldn't try to terrace it. I don't know if anybody else.
Yeah.
I think I would rather see that as planters.
Or planters.
Or planter, or a mix, you know,
Yeah.
maybe a little bit of both. But,
I think we could study a mix there also.
Yeah, I'm just saying, I'm pretty sure you're gonna have to have a handrail between the sidewalk and those steps, and that's gonna change everything.
Yeah, you have to have, and, you know, weirdly enough, you have this really great, you know, that metal mesh that you're using, that could be, you know, another variation on that, and use that as a guardrail there, but then it really cuts down on what you're trying to do with it in the first place.
Right, yeah, I mean, we didn't want to reduce kind of the railing would certainly kind of separate it even more, so I certainly.
I guess I think about that little corner of the Arras facing southwest. It has now, for like 3 years, it seemed like, there was this elevated concrete podium that, like, what's happening here? What do we use this for? And I don't think it got a whole lot better by sticking that sculpture there.
Any other questions for the applicant?
I just have a comment. I thank you for going back and looking at the streetscape and working in the pavement changes and adding a little bit more thought, or having a little bit more thought into that realm. I think I like what you've done. The green walls, I think that's a nice gesture, but I feel like a planter, if you're going to do any sort of green element there, I think a planter is more affordable and probably in the long run will perform better, have deeper soil depths, and you just have more flexibility in what plants you can put in there, because there are going to be microclimates. So I think that's more affordable and probably more flexible for the long term.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I think that's kind of why we left it as
Yeah.
an either or, just so we could make sure we were providing the right.
That makes sense. So, and I definitely appreciate the extra street trees. So that's a positive for me.
How many additional street trees are there beyond what's required by the
I
ordinance?
believe we had, was it, Tony, can you?
Is it two?
I think it's 2 on Carter and 1 on Ennis.
Okay, so,
Could you speak to how you're meeting the 300 cubic feet per street tree requirement? I see the sidewalk tree pit, detail 4, but I'm having a hard time coming up with the amount of, Tony, you know what I'm asking? It's the 300 cubic feet in the urban zones for street trees. How are you getting the amended soil?
My name's Tony Hauser. I'm with WSP. Appreciate the chair and committee for hearing the project today. We would meet it through that detail, the use of that detail.
So is it just under the tree grate, or are you doing suspended?
No, it's beyond, yeah, there's suspended walk, so it extends beyond that. That walk is, I think the standard, we're actually proposing to modify that detail a little bit. Will and I have talked about that, but it's right now, I think it's supported by a layer of crushed stone, and we're proposing to use expanded polystyrene sheets as an alternative.
Okay,
So,
okay. Thank you,
yeah.
thank you.
I'd like to just commend the architect. I'm kind of new to this committee. I was on previous design review committees, and I feel like it's one of the best jobs of taking the guidelines and adding architecture, you know, base, middle, cap, gauging the streetscape. I think there's a lot of great layering, a lot of textures, a lot of great materials. It's one of the best projects I've seen. I know we're having a hard time it being a hotel, but in terms of design, I think you've done a great job.
I would second that, and I think you've worked really well with our recommendations, and I think the architecture is really good.
Thank you. I certainly appreciate that, and certainly see this as a collaboration. So, thank you for all your great suggestions and willingness to listened to us multiple times come up here and present this. We're certainly excited about it, and I want to be an improvement, an amenity to the city that everyone can enjoy.
And I'd like to just mention that I agree too. This has been a good process with the architecture. It's been a good example of how, even though our design guidelines are a couple decades old, there are recommendations. Design is very subjective, and there have been recommendations made by the architects on this committee that have helped, as a team, I think, work together to produce a better product that in the end is going to command, better room rates and better favorability within the community. My concern, there's 2 landscape architects on this committee. My concern is the comments that are being made by the landscape architects and those that are trained in site design are being seen as, as long as they meet TRSC requirements and technical specifications, they're good to go. If that's the case, the landscape architects don't need to be on this committee. There is nothing that I can see that is beyond the bare minimum on this site in terms of helping to improve or impact the urban heat island effect. There's 3 trees that are 2 inches in caliber. I mean, is that a measurable difference? No. I do have to say that in terms of the initial design steps being made on the streetscape, I really appreciate the effort, especially with the one thing that I see that is the most successful is pulling the paving at the entrances. We don't really know what that paving is, but at that level of detail is not really necessary for us. I think that the planters that are shown on the one street, what is that, Ann? On Ann, I think that it's a good direction, but there's no level of thought or design in that, and I just don't think it goes nearly in the direction of where it needs to go, or the level of thought by trained site planners. I think that Michael's comments about the flex zone planters were agreed, but the most important part about this aesthetically is the handrails are going to be required, and it's going to change the entire look. I think it's going to be a dead space. There's no doorway openings on any of those. There's so many other things that could be done to make that an engaging space. Yes, these are design suggestions. Yes, they're subjective. All the suggestions you guys made were the same. And I don't appreciate the fact that there's been so much focus on green roof and substituting other stormwater requirements. The suggestion of a green roof in combination with other subsurface stormwater requirements was made because we felt that it was a cost-appropriate, beneficial to the developer and the community idea. It was an idea. There are several other ways this project could have reached or can reach to provide innovative stormwater management features. That is in the design guidelines, just like the comments that you made were in the design guidelines. If we accept the site as is, as it pertains to stormwater and the impact to downtown and the urban heat island effect, there is no purpose for the design review committee. This committee does not stop this project. We all know this is a very good project. This committee does not stop it. There's always the option to go to city council. If we don't set a standard that we feel like is reachable, we're all working design professionals back here. We're on your side, trust me. We sit back on your side where other volunteers like yourself in the community sit back here. And we do it all the time. HRC, planning and zoning, I mean, we are not being unrealistic at all. And I would, I know you probably would love to see some of these features on your project. As Tony, I'm not going to speak for you, but as designers, you would love to be able to implement some of these features that would have a strong and significant impact on the city of Asheville. If we don't require this as a part of our review, we're not necessarily requiring it as success for the project. We're simply requiring it as the ability for this committee to recommend to the citizens and city of Asheville that this is a good project for our city. We are not asking for anything that is out of the norm or unusual. We're just asking for something that is unique and innovative. It actually makes a difference. Right now, minimum standard, check TRC. TRC is a bunch of city staff that have written guidelines in front of them that has nothing to do with design. And, you know, hotel after hotel are coming in right behind this, folks. And yes, the architecture has seen a really good path through this process, but the site has not. And we can try to smoke screen it with adding a couple of trees. You know, there hasn't even been an attempt to increase the caliber of these trees. They're still 2-inch caliber. I mean, for God's sake, folks, y'all have heard me enough talk about this on this committee, but you know, we can set the site to a different standard if that's how this committee wants to treat it. But, you know, yes, our design guidelines need work, and that's in process. But we have the ability to require, as a part of our approval and acceptance, we have the ability to require something just a little bit better than the base standard. That's all I'm asking for.
I agree with Stephen. Part of what's difficult about these reviews, especially these hotel reviews, is we're tasked with reviewing these hotels and saying that, yes, there is a community benefit to these. This is good for our community, this is good for our town. And it's hard to do so when only the bare minimum is met, because this hotel will be in our town for years to come. There will be money made, there will be people visiting and staying here, but I don't know how much it's going to do for the community. So, other than looking at a beautiful building, which...
Well,
Somebody remind us, so I remember all our discussion about green roof and street trees. What are some of the other site opportunities? I think that's the first time I heard about increasing the size of trees.
Well, so I'm looking at, yeah,
We've asked for that. We've asked for larger trees.
And they,
on the downtown design review guidelines, for example, there's a requirement 6 landscaping, you know, required as provided in the UDO, street trees. And then it says recommendations. Recommended materials for walls include brick, stone, metal, or materials that may be part of a unified development proposal. I think they've done that. Consider other landscaping, recommendation 6B, consider other landscaping measures to soften the pedestrian experience by providing additional plantings other than the minimum required, pervious materials, etc. So softening the pedestrian experience. So they have provided some additional plantings along the pedestrian, at least a few, what, you said 3 street trees? 3 street trees, maybe, I thought they said they had a little bit more, maybe it was some other areas of the site. Native non-invasive landscaping, 6C, 6D, urban landscape plantings should incorporate opportunities for irrigation and drainage systems to maintain plant vitality. So those are, I think, examples, Michael, that I would go to of things. And then they talked about sidewalks, again, recommendations, prominent material changes, 8A. We're not on a key pedestrian street, so that one doesn't, neither of those, granite curbs. Street furnishings, requirement 9. So basically, our guidelines do contain a lot of things that are not building architecture, but are site design. And I kind of don't like that distinction. I think it should be one comprehensive design project, but yes.
Well, I just think a building at this scale and this expense, these details should be presented to us to review. We're not here to design it, but there are huge opportunities. And we've just mentioned green roofs in terms of stormwater because it seems to be the most realistic, most cost-effective, and to make the most design sense. There are other buildings that it's not going to make any sense. You know, there may be better, you know, options on site, but there's just no area on site to improve that. And it's multifunctional. You know, it's not just about the stormwater, it's about the heat island impact.
I think that if the level of architecture was at the level of the site, you all would be having a fit. You would want more information, you would want examples, you would want things worked out so I know what I'm approving or not approving. And so I think that's also a part of what Stephen Lee's saying. And this is a discussion for our committee, but I think that it's important for us all to understand that and to be respectful of the fact that typically the architecture is way more thought through, way more developed, and you all have a lot more time to weigh in on it. And I think that needs to change. I think what Stephen Lee, especially for hotel projects downtown, is that we're expecting more than the bare minimum for hotel projects. And when we ask for that, what we get in response is, what are the design guidelines? That's it. Why aren't we approving this? So that's, I think, part of this too.
And this has been stated in previous meetings on this project, that specific thought.
And isn't specific to this project.
No,
I think there have been
no, it's-
projects before this that we've said the same thing. So
Can we revisit the caliper on the trees, for instance? Because I don't remember a dialogue as to why the applicant has not.
Yeah, we did not recall that from the previous meetings, and we're happy to increase those calipers to 3 to 4 inches in caliper for this project. So we're happy to make that concession.
And the planter size, are there any issues with the planter size and the caliper of the tree in terms of sustainability?
As long as they're providing the.
I just
soil
think,
volume.
I mean, we can try to piece this together right now, Michael, but it's just not there. There's no level of design that's going into the streetscape. We can try to, parse these little planters that are down there that have been patched in, but I mean, there are planters on here that won't even work. There are planters that are underneath the building as you drive in. How are you going to water those in the wintertime? You're not going to use irrigation. Is the bellhop going to water it? No, they're going to all die. Has there been a landscape architect that designed this? Increasing the tree caliper is fantastic. The opening day of the hotel will be profoundly different, especially if it was, the Eris opened up with 4 to 5 inch caliper trees. And it made a huge difference. And now they're the best looking street trees in downtown Asheville. But, it's just, we've said this at every part of this review, and we're not seeing anything. Today we're seeing a nice baby step, but we're not seeing design. And for the scale of this project, it's a hotel. I am not driven personally to recommend approval. Do we just do it because we're tired of reviewing this? This is a hotel, and it's why we're here. What are we going to do with the next one? Or are they just going to take the route and know that if they don't want to work on the site design, if they don't want to demonstrate true and serious commitments to the urban heat island impact and innovative stormwater management, they can go to city council? And it basically boils down to that. And I'm not trying to be difficult, it's just extremely frustrating. And, maybe the developer, the designer, we've always spoken with the designers, maybe the developer or the developer's legal counsel wants to come up and explain to us why we can't see these things. Or is it all because of financial impact? The last I heard, hotels are doing pretty well in this town. And we appreciate all that the hoteliers do for this city. But I have no obligation to try to recommend something that I don't think is going to be an improvement on our environment and the pedestrian experience. And I'm just, it doesn't just boil down to architecture. In fact, this is probably more important than architecture.
I think I hear.
Mind if I make a couple comments?
Pardon?
Do you mind if I make a couple comments?
Please do.
So hotels were, as you're all aware, development was stopped for a year with the moratorium. with the intended purpose of creating a definable way for hospitality developers to build hotels in Asheville. That was the point of that. And the UDO defines those minimums. So that's what a hospitality developer looks at. That's what my client looks at to determine their pro forma for their development and whether or not it will work financially. And I can appreciate that you think hotels do very well. How many do you own?
I don't know any, I have a lot of clients that do.
And you have to work for your clients. You have to do what your clients ask you to do. You may propose things like green roofs, or you may propose alternative stormwater measures, but in the end, who makes that decision? You or the client?
I've never presented a project before the design review committee at this stage. This is the first time we've done this, Tony. And it's a new day for hotels to go through the city of Asheville. It's not about minimum standards. And I would have informed my client of that at the very beginning.
You need to have a conversation with the folks at the city that maintain the streetscape. Because when I talk to the people in stormwater and when I talk to the people in public works, they don't want the things that you're asking for.
And that
So
would be what? That would be what?
Stormwater measures beneath the trees, for example. The PERT stormwater measures, they don't want to maintain them. They don't have the staff to maintain them. So if you want to ask, let me finish, please. If you want to ask for things from designers, and I'm a landscape architect, as you know. I'm also a civil engineer, as you know. And I don't appreciate some of the comments you've made suggesting that this hasn't been designed. Because what you're doing is you're directly insulting me, and I don't appreciate it. Can you be quiet for a minute? I am doing what my client is trying to do in order to develop a hotel in the city of Asheville in an affordable way, okay? And we are meeting what the UDO requires and what the design review guidelines require. And we have gone above and beyond based on the input that we've had from this committee. And I think, along with Matt and my other team members, that it's made the project a better project, better development. But that's what we're offering.
Can I respond?
Please.
I will. I am not saying that the current streetscape design does not meet the minimum standard. We're not saying that. And it obviously is going to be safe. It's going to meet code requirements. It's going to be accessible. I'm going to assume the concrete's going to be poured and laid adequately. But what I'm talking about is something that includes a level of design at the streetscape level. And if I have to spell that out in detail with photographs, and then also, I'm not talking about the innovative stormwater measures don't have to be in the public right-of-way. You just happen to pick the one that staff may have told you they didn't want to have to maintain. You know, there's none of that downtown. That's why we haven't even mentioned that. That's really difficult to pull off. But there's other simple measures that we have suggested, and it's just, you know, I've been in your seat, Tony, many times, and I've been very successful with clients. I can show you things at the Foundry Hotel all day long that they agree to.
I'm going to contradict you on the stormwater suggestions that you've made, because you have made the suggestion of the ones in the right-of-way and the green roof. Those are the two that I can recall. Are there others that you have made?
I haven't made any suggestions about ones in the right-of-way underneath trees. I've made suggestions that there are ways of planting street trees without tree grates when you don't have parking along the street that can create a beautiful streetscape. And, you know, as with many other projects and many other facilities, sometimes owners take responsibility of what's in front of their building. Like they might clean off the sidewalks more than what the city does. They may sweep them or blow them off more than the city does. But again, the concept of a multifunctional stormwater mitigation management tool that works in concert with something you have subsurface was simply a suggestion and us trying to help move a beautiful building forward.
I appreciate that. I appreciate the suggestions. And you can see what we've come back with based on our conversations, our meetings with our client, and they're reviewing their budget for the project. and what they're willing to do. And this owner may clean off the sidewalks more than this, than the typical owner does. The use of open planter areas, open tree areas along sidewalks removes them from accessibility. People can't walk through them. You end up having to put little fences around them so people don't walk through them. And in this case, people don't camp in them and use them as restrooms, because that's what they would be used for in this location. Between A-Hope and Salvation Army, they become a place for people to urinate and defecate.
Well, and we've talked about that, Tony. Our hopes, my hopes are in the future, that's not going to be an issue, but that should not be a design guiding principle. And there are definitely other ways of doing this where you don't have to do it with, sectioned off planters. You can do it with unit pavers that have a band of unit pavers behind the curb that provide a much larger soil system for the trees.
The city standard, however, is a tree grade. And you can hope in one hand and you could spit in the other, and you can guess which one's going to get full first.
Yeah, but you didn't present anything other to the city other than the standard tree grade.
Okay,
Maybe, let me,
let's let the council.
maybe I won't make it better, but I'm going to certainly try to. And what I hear is a lot of passion, both from the design professionals around the team and a lot of passion from the volunteers that are sitting behind this desk who do this for free. I do this for the planning board for Buncombe County. It is a thankless job. You're spending hours of your personal time for somebody else, and we appreciate it. I'm sorry, John Noor. I'm with Robertson Stevens. I just jumped in there. So with all of that being said, I can absolutely understand what Mr. Johnson is asking for, and Ms. Ankaya, if I pronounced that correctly, hopefully.
Great job.
And I think we also, something else we got between the last meeting and this meeting is some additional guidance about those requirements and those recommendations. And I also think a potential solution for what you're articulating going forward. And what that guidance was from council was that those things that are recommendations really need to be treated with that flexibility that are recommendations and not requirements. And I have that memo. I think everybody received it as well. One of the things that was also mentioned was that if this committee wants to transition some of those things from recommendations to requirements, that is a possibility for you all to do in the future. But at this point, where you all have already had a very positive impact on the design of this building from an architectural standpoint, have gotten maybe not everything that you would have wanted from the site standpoint. It is, I think what I'm hearing, a fundamentally better project than it was first produced from your perspective. And that was the purpose of this process, again, back to Tony's point, of creating one that if you do follow these rules that we took time to adopt, this is how you can get to approval. And if you meet them, that's how it's going to work. And if you don't, then you can choose to go through a conditional zoning process. So I just asked the committee members, think about that guidance that you got from legal counsel, think about the improvements that you have made to this project already, and move towards the approval that I think is what this project ultimately deserves under the guidelines that apply for the standard and process that we're going through. So again, thank you so much for your time. I know it got heated. I think, again, it's just the passion amongst professionals, and that happens to me and happens to all of us. So thank you.
Thank you. Can we open this up for public comment?
Yeah, I was just thinking.
I'm going to open this up for public comment.
Can we?
We're going to have continued discussion amongst ourselves. I've been holding on to mine to the end. I think we've had enough back and forth between the applicant and staff, but I want to go through the process and then discuss. Pardon?
You can do that as a recommendation.
We can make that as a condition. Is there anybody who wants to make public comment? Open for public comment at 1:19 and close it at 1:19. Some further discussion. Kate and Stephen Lee.
It's not about the landscape architects. This is about the process, Jeremy.
So if I can speak, that's all I'm thinking about is about the process. And I feel like this process is being twisted as the rules are currently written. And one reason why we requested some guidance is because I've been getting peppered from all sides about this. And I'm like, I'd like some guidance here because this is a new committee. It's a new ordinance. What are our parameters? What can we and can't we do? The Design Review Committee reviews in those three areas, and the only area that has a mandatory review, mandatory compliance, is the one that has a community benefits table associated with it. If you abide by the community benefits table and pay into the system to create community benefits, you can bypass the conditional zoning process, which I know quite well. I spent 6 years up here doing it. I feel like this is turning into a conditional zoning process, which makes me very uncomfortable. It's not arbitrary. The things that you're asking for, while I may personally want them, my feeling about the way to get them through process is either A, to amend the ordinance that specifies what design we can weigh in on. Can we weigh in on structural design? Can we weigh in on civil design? Can we weigh in on, either be more specific there, or, as we know, which will take forever, is update the design review guidelines in the UDO. So I understand the frustration. I'm very uncomfortable with telling somebody you have to do better but not knowing what that is, not knowing what that bar is. I think that puts our city at risk. I don't think it will get us what we want. So to me, it's all about process, and that's my concern.
What I don't understand is, we haven't even voted on this. This could have been approved 2 meetings ago. And here we are jumping to all of these conclusions. We have a letter, and what I'm hearing from not just myself and everyone at this table are recommendations. And have you looked at this? It would be like an architect saying, have you looked at this different type of facade? Or I'm going to use all the wrong language. But I guess I don't understand why it's gotten to this point when there hasn't even been a vote taken. And if a vote had been taken and this was, it did not approve, then I feel like this would be a good conversation to have. But I feel like it's gone way out in outfield.
Do we have a motion?
No, but I think it's important to note, and I think that actually what's happened is not a positive step. I think it's been several steps backwards, because what I feel are, my hands have been slapped because I've made some recommendations, shared some things, or asked for things, and it's a red flag to me that those requests or request to explore their materials or other things have been met with, oh my goodness, you can't do that, we need to stick with this. If it's just a checkbox, then why are we here? And I also have to say that I don't appreciate the different standard between the architecture and the site. That is not specific to this project. That is a problem with this committee. And I don't appreciate that, and I don't think that is helpful for our community.
It's not fair to call out Kate and Stephen Lee as if they are the problem. We all can have things that we disagree with and recommendations that we make that may not be popular to the design team or the committee. But we are a committee, and if their recommendations are the same as anyone else's recommendations.
And requests. And to be honest, I was going to vote for this last time. So, I mean, come on.
So we may, we as architects, we are talking to the applicants about not just the requirements, but the recommendations and the guidelines all the time. Building ordering, layering, detail. Ricardo and I are getting into where your muttons are located.
That's exactly my point. This
So
language about subjective.
You should be able to get into where the trash cans are and what they're made out of.
I would love to talk about trash cans.
Well, no, it's in the
is,
recommendations is my point. It's part of the recommendation. So if Ricardo and Robin and I and Christina can talk about window muttons and how close they are together, then I can also, because I can look at it, I can also talk about trash cans, because this mentions street furnishings and benches and things like that. So I understand what council was saying, that, us voting on where the trash cans are located, if we list that as a material consideration in rejecting an application, but we can absolutely talk about it and request additional information. And if I understand my more educated, talented colleagues on this, is that what we're getting architecturally is not commensurate with the information they're getting on the things that they know best.
That, and also, an acceptance of being able to ask questions, explore other options, and go delve into the subjective, which when I read that in the letter, I understood that. But I listen to subjective architectural talk all day long at these meetings, and there has never been a comment about that. And then the moment we want to talk about a tree species or what is this green panel, it's like we're out of line. And I think that's my point. And so I respect the process. I think it's working. I appreciate all of you. But I do think I did need to say all of that.
Kate, I agree with you. I think one of the major things on this project is that the architecture changed based on recommendations that were not requirements before we made a vote, and that didn't happen with the landscape design. And I think, I agree with your sentiment, and I think that it's important to continue to bring up those recommendations and not hide behind the requirements. I think it's something that we have to discuss. Whether it's voted on or not is part of the process. But I think it's very important that as a committee we can bring up those comments.
Does it make sense to continue this conversation after we deal with the projects?
Sure.
Yeah, I wanted everyone to hear my soapbox.
So I really do, Stephen Lee, I'm not necessarily pushing back, I'm asking a question. So it's dead. But I tried to go through some of the recommendations. So they are, there are the requirements and then there's some recommendations. It seems to me they are meeting some recommendations. They're providing, we can quibble on whether, but they're providing more than the minimum required plantings. I didn't see anything in there about irrigation. Did you guys see anything in there, whether they were meeting that?
I would
Okay.
assume that level of detail is
Not in the plans, and they are at least providing a prominent material change at the entries. So there's a couple of things that they're doing that are more than the minimum requirements in the UDO.
Correct.
Okay, all right, I just making sure I was reading the recommendations and everything correctly. No, I was getting there.
Okay.
I'm almost ready for you. Yeah, I'm getting ready. Thank you. My eyes are not new. So,
Brian, can you include today's discussion about increasing the tree size?
yeah, I got you. I'm going to make a motion. I move to recommend approval of the Carter Street mixed-use and tribute hotel project as presented based on the site plans, elevations, and materials submitted and discussions heard during this review, as well as the applicant's amendment to increase the caliper size to 4 to 5 inches for these street trees.
3 to 4.
3 to 4.
And the
I tried.
roofing product, right?
Do what?
Roofing product to address.
And that the applicant will review the albedo of the proposed roof to meet, do you have a solar coefficient you're looking for? Or to minimize the urban heat island effect of the roof product. And find that the project meets the intent of the downtown design guidelines.
And that funky step terrace zone?
That the applicant is going to review the terrace zone to remove the requirement for any proposed handrails between that zone and the sidewalk.
Ann Street, right?
On Ann Street.
Not Ann Street.
Any further conditions? So moved.
We have a motion, do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? By a show of hands.
Let's do
a roll call vote?
Do a roll call.
Let's start in the end, Tom. All those in favor, well, I'm gonna just do a roll call vote.
It's up to your discretion, I guess, whatever. Since we're
I'm gonna do it by a show of hands.
Okay.
Okay, by a show of hands, all those in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, by a show of hands, all those opposed, please raise your hand. Okay, so 7-2, approved.
Yeah.
Okay, motion passes 7-2.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, I think that is the last item on our agenda. If I could bring it up, but I can't.
I did just again want to say thank you for your time. I know it's
Thank
a
you.
significant
Well-
commitment of your own personal time. Thank you.
What do we have to do to change the design guideline?
So we are currently working on getting that project off the ground. We have some funding to start that process.
Yeah, but can I, as the downtown commission, can I propose that we strengthen the language in one thing or add things? I mean, can I sit
Yeah.
down with Kate and Stephen Lee and a couple others, and if we need additional language in the downtown design guidelines, like next week?
Yeah.
How hard is that?
There's,
Because this is
So,
ridiculous,
yeah,
because they're not wrong. The architecture got visibly better every time. They asked the same questions and nothing was happening on the site. And
Well-
until today.
And are we off record? We're
No, we're still in. So,
But you can say whatever you
We-
want.
I'm going to wait till we're off record.
well,
Well, I like-
future discussion topics, this could be a future discussion topic. Plus, if you're able to come early to the meeting, we can certainly, bring stuff, but that is open to the public as well.
Yeah, the
But this could be a good future discussion topic as well.
Yeah, the guidelines are the purview of the DRC, I think in consultation with the downtown commission and staff.
Does it have to go to council?
Changes, I don't think the changes that, as long as the UDO is not being proposed.
We're not
to be
changing the
amended.
UDO. These are the downtown,
Yeah.
it
that's-
should be this board and the downtown commission.
Right.
There's a simple change that can be made, because where we have the word recommendation all over the place, if we want to apply that to, level 1, level 2, wherever, or we want to apply that specifically to hotels, we can put a sentence on the first page of the design guidelines today that says, all the items in this document are requirements for hotels.
Yeah, but and that's fine, but there's a process for that. Public
Sure.
process, a community process,
Sure,
and that's
and
my whole
that-
point, is
and that is-
let's do that process.
Let's do that.
Well,
so
that's
that
what
way
we're
all
asking.
can-
That's what we're asking Will, is what
Yeah.
is that process and how long does that take?
I think it depends on the scope of the changes. So I think if they're minor changes, they can be done relatively expeditiously. If they're major changes that are going to significantly impact,
Cost viability, performance, sure, let's have that discussion, but we can have, so you're saying the public forum would be the downtown commission?
typically, I just think it depends on the
Possibly
scope of the
planning and
changes.
zoning?
So
Possibly plan, so if we're clarifying, we want to add flags to street furnishings, we could probably do that tomorrow.
Right.
If we want to remove the green roof, are encouraged to required for hotels, that's a larger discussion.
Yeah, that's a more intermediate change size-wise. I think we changed everything in the guidelines to be requirements for hotels, and I think that'd be a larger public discussion.
But I don't know that we can
Okay.
require everything to be, because a lot of these recommendations are mutually exclusive
They
when
are,
you
so
go, when
that
you
would
go
be-
through and read them.
yeah,
We
so-
can't do that.
I think that kind of change would take more study. I think if it was things like changing the scope of the.
I mean, it's not us, but you
stormwater.
can look at the community benefits table. I haven't looked at it recently, more closely about weighing that differently, or, putting more incentives in there, or,
And that'd be more in the
Playing
UDO
with-
change, that'd be a
yeah.
little more, but that could be done in conjunction with, if design guide changes too, it would just be a different
All right,
process.
so we as a commission, as a DRC then, we need to understand what the low-hanging fruit is, things that we can change in conjunction, in cooperation with the downtown commission. And then we need to understand maybe what would require a bigger process.
I recall, when we were on downtown commission, there was kind of a running list of tweaks that was being developed. Does staff have like the cheat sheet on things you guys were keeping track of that came up over
We have
the
some,
last 10 years?
yeah, we do have some older copies of that we've been kind of digging up and referencing. I think some might still be relevant, I think some might need a fresher look at. But yeah, I know that process was kind of started in fits and starts, updated, but didn't ultimately end up with any updates. We can certainly take a look back at that. We've started to unearth some of those documents as we move towards, this comprehensive update. I mean, I'd be happy to maybe the next meeting talk through, maybe if you all send me some of your suggestions for immediate changes that we could look at in the meantime, we can talk through it maybe at the next meeting or and at the Downtown Commission's next meeting, which I think happens after the design review.
I think it does because we moved early.
Yeah.
The
Would it
next
be
design review, we will likely have the
It's gonna
sister
be this-
hotel to
It's
this.
gonna be the one, you know.
Yeah.
And I don't know if we've reviewed another hotel since 72 Create, but that was also awful,
Yeah.
awful. So we
Yeah, I
need
don't
to
know
do
if we
something
can,
quickly.
I don't know if we make any changes between now and when.
Is it possible to get, so I think a few times we were told that we would get a Google Drive folder that we could use and we could put our comments in. What is the process for getting that? Like, can I start the Google Drive folder? Like, how can we get it?
You want it to be city housed.
Right, but
Right.
I think it was supposed to be started, or we talked about it at the end of
Right.
last year.
I can provide some kind of direction about how we can collect our thoughts. I think it needs to be done in a way that's obviously in the public view, and we can't have like electronic meetings on the side, but we can certainly share our
But why,
ideas.
why was the architectural team willing to listen to our recommendations and the site team was
I don't
less?
think that this is specific to this team.
No,
I
no,
think this
no,
is like a
Yeah,
general-
it's hotel,
I have a theory on that.
it's hotels.
Yeah, because I think with 72 Broadway, there
I
was
think-
resistance with the architecture
Oh,
as
well, that's true.
I think it's just gonna
the
be a
reason
long
the
road.
architectural team is more responsive is because the stuff we were asking for and the stuff we were asking about doesn't really change the price tag. You know what I mean?
Yes, sir.
It's like whether you do this or align it this way or that way.
well. And it
It-
doesn't
it's-
require redesign.
Exactly.
It was small.
Exactly. So it was really tweaks and that, you know, I think everybody agrees improved the overall design, but it was a no-cost change.
And it wasn't a terrible design
Right.
from the
Well,
beginning.
So
As
if
I
they-
mentioned it-
If they have to go in, you know, and add, you know, whatever site amenities or redesign the site, then there's a bigger cost implication, and that's presumably why they were, you know, rejecting it.
I mean, they've got two sides.
So, yeah, I agree with you. I have a question though, that letter that you shared, it said in there that the project must receive approval by the DRC in order to receive final development approval and a building permit. The way that was stated made it sound like we were the end game.
Right, which
And
is
that's
not
not true, because they can go to city council and obtain a building permit
Yeah.
and approval, right?
We're the end game in that process from a political zoning process. I mean, they still have to get the building permits.
But if we vote no, they can still go to city council.
They can still
They
get
can.
it.
It's about entitlement.
They can.
Okay.
Yeah,
The only-
then they're going to conditional zoning. So then you throw out the community benefits table and you just start from
You start horse trading.
It's a completely horse trading situation.
Which is what we're trying to get away from.
Well, and it's not, that will be tested as well at some point, because the things that council technically can ask for have to be related to the zoning of the site, and it's not, and their defense has been, well, it's mutually agreed to.
Yeah, and that's gotten them in trouble.
And so, where I'm coming from is, well, can we adjourn?
Yes.
Yeah, let's.
1:39, can we adjourn?
Do not
Well,
adjourn.
Oh, we can't, thank you,
I mean,
fine.
that's, yeah, we can end the meeting, but.
So, thank you.
We should leave if we have to.
I'm getting inundated from a lot of different places, so I'm like, I don't know the answers to these questions. Give us guidance.
Well,
I don't know what that guidance is gonna say. I just want it before a meeting so we don't get ourselves into trouble.
Yeah.
And so we do the right thing. This is a new committee. So where I'm coming from is not, specifically with you two, it's that I'm getting,
Well, and
emails
this
and calls
was-
from all over the place.
This was incredibly helpful, and, we have to remind ourselves that this is the first time this has ever been done.
Right.
And there's a really strong reason why this committee was developed, and not to, I think that the design team that is in place for this specific project is extremely talented. And I doubt that this team can demonstrate any streetscape they have designed themselves that meets what we're looking for. I'm gonna leave it at that, okay? And we're also talking about really simple stuff. but we're also talking about not this specific project, but in some cases, developers have never been involved in a project that executes what we're looking for. And we're not talking about expensive stuff. We're talking about creative design. I could take those little stack planter things they were doing on the side and come up with a great idea like that, because I've done it before. And it doesn't have to be plans. But I was just thinking about ideas, but there's not someone on the design team that can do that. And I said that last month. And what they can do is to really get civil engineering. And they're darn good at it. And what they can do is, as directed by their clients in some projects, to meet the standards. And they're not used to having to meet a design standard. And when they're able to use this use in some projects, not necessarily one reviewed today, that city staff doesn't like maintaining so-and-so, that is a really big problem. And
It's funny because they don't, you know, by that logic, we'd have nothing.
right, we're talking
Because they don't
about,
want to maintain anything.
we're
It's the same
talking
thing
about
as in a school.
hardworking, dedicated public works guys and gals that have a tough job, and they're understaffed, probably underpaid and all that, but it's just, as Kate mentioned, this is a really challenging process as we move forward, but we finally have a chance to have a type of development that has a huge impact on our city, to have to meet a level of design that we feel like is appropriate for Asheville. And the team has to include a level of thought and detail into the site design like they do their building. They just slap this stuff on there. I mean, and it's just really frustrating. I mean, they could have come through, and I'm going to talk about this specific project we reviewed today. They could have done something that would have added tremendous value to their residential units on the upper floors and satisfied our requirement. They could have put a green roof on top of that ballroom, and that's it.
I mean, I'm the least, you know, I'm the non-designer here, so.
Yeah, but you're an experienced developer.
The guy that
If
doesn't
you-
know anything. I hate what they're doing on Ann Street. I hate it. I think it's a lost opportunity. That's a street, that's not an alley, it's not a back. And I pushed to begin with what I felt I could, because I know the code, that you gotta do a 2-story occupiable building. You can't make it look 2 stories. But then you have this whole site with no action, you know, you have one doorway and then it's basically like a dead zone. There's no activation in any of those. Wouldn't that be cool if each of those had a little door in there and people could go in and get some activity? And
Yeah.
But the code probably says minimum distances from door to opening, and so I pushed where I felt like I could, to the extent that I knew. But I mean, I put brownstones on there, put people living there. Put rooftop gardens, vegetable gardens on there, and then the area will get safer. But I don't have the ability to make them do it. I've told them because it's not quasi-judicial, so when they're all, you know, threatening me or calling me or hounding me or what not, I mean, I push back. But
I worry a little bit about the resistance and tension. The architect seemed, you know, very collegial and was listening. I think there was a good rapport between, like, a positive collegial rapport. I feel like on the site side, what happened was the opposite. And so that resistance isn't helping them, it's not helping us get what we want, and it almost was this roadblock that was impossible to get over. And I don't want to create that, and we're not going to make any progress.
But I think we've
how do we
seen that
change it?
on the
Because they're coming
architecture
back
side
next
as well,
month.
like
Have
the
you?
72,
Right.
what was it called, 72 I think there was resistance and there was some of that pushback there. And I think it depends on, I think that part of it depends on the project and the team.
I mean, I told Peter Alvarez in the meeting that this is, I've seen a lot of this stuff and really enjoyed it. This is the worst thing I've ever seen you do.
Well, I was wondering if on the site side, it's just that by asking people for things that they haven't done before, immediately creates a big no because they're unfamiliar, as opposed to something that they've tried before. But that doesn't feel good to me. I don't like that.
There's an uncomfortable feeling in having to incorporate a level of design into what some people feel like is just a given. 10 feet, tree grates, score, we're done, check, next. And then like, okay, we can do a white membrane on this roof, great, we'll do it, check. Waterproof, owner's happy, check. Urban heat island effect, no improvement, if anything, you know, a project like this increases it with all the exhaust from mechanicals and cars coming into that location.
Did you read about that white paint? New York Times read a great
Oh my
article.
gosh, I have
This-
so much to
this-
say about
this-
that.
Bro, I don't know,
Exactly.
but it was like extra white and it cools down and.
But here's the thing, we already have something that does that.
Okay,
But
I'm
we
just
gotta
saying.
like, put something for all this money that then's gonna degrade and then
All right. Do we have, it's 1:46, we have a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion that we adjourn. Oh,
Yes, Michael, make the motion to adjourn, got a second?
got a second?
We're adjourned.
All in favor?
Aye.
I'll touch base with other staff that are working on the guideline updates, maybe see what the best interim approach could be, and just to clarify, I mean, it is the DRC's